All right, our next project, assignment 11, is trying to focus on a weakness of photography as a document. Photography does a great job of depicting the naturalistic world in one discrete instant, a specific time and place. The problem was it's limited from only one point of view. So even very early photography played around with 3 dimensions. This is what's called a stereoscopic image. So the photo was taken at the same instant from 2 different lenses that were spaced roughly the same spacing as the human eyes. And then they were put on stereoscopic cards, and you looked at them in something that looked like an old viewfinder, and you would get a 3D image. The digital version of it is just to play those images back to back so you get a sense of that 3-dimensional space. So that was the first kind of experimentation with multiple images to make photography a clearer document. You add color to that with colorization, and you start to get a believable document of an experience. Now, this idea of sequential images, multiple images to show documentation, can also be applied to how things change over time. So each photo is taken at a certain moment, but if you space those moments out and then you show all the photos together, like the decomposition of this pelican, revealing all the plastics that it's ingested inside, then what you're really showing as your art form isn't the individual exposure. Looks like a seagull rather than a pelican. What you're showcasing is the metamorphosis over time. So photography, when used in the right way and in the right discipline, can showcase something a lot more important than just a single image. It can showcase a transformation. Now, probably the most expensive and most important documentation ever trusted to a camera were for the Apollo missions, orbiting the moon and then landing on the moon. And so these are some of the shots taken from the orbiters, which were later used to map the moon. Now, shown in sequence as they were taken doesn't really show you too much, but then when they're all placed side by side, it forms a map of the lunar surface, which was used to determine where the landing site should be for future missions. Now, this might not be the only reason you would put sequential images right next to each other. This art piece by Christopher Cox in 2002 uses existing film stills from movies and simply puts them through, and some commercials, and showcases them side by side so that we start noticing differences between them from different space movies like Alien or 2001 or whatever the rest of these are from, and Barbarella, and we start to see some of the aesthetic differences just because they're side by side. Or here in this piece, which is all from TV remotes. Or this piece of different lenses and just the subtle variations. We can only see the variations when they're side by side. Wide angle versus telephoto. Now, your project is to somehow make a metamorphosis, a transformation, your subject matter, for a series of shots. And I would say no fewer than 9 shots are really necessary to do this really well in a clean way. But there are some problems with that. So for instance, with the construction of the Eiffel Tower between 1887 and 1889, the original photographs were taken to document the build before they really knew what the final project would look like. And so each frame is trying to be an interesting, balanced composition. But by the time they actually kind of understood what it would look like, they decided that they really should photograph in a different way. And so they switched to this mode of photographing it where it was always a standard composition that would eventually show the whole form. So you need to approach this project in the same way. You need to know what the finished composition would be of your transformation and make sure that every step you want to document fits within that composition. And we are going to not use a vertical composition or a panoramic composition like this. Instead, we are going to use squares. And square compositions are tough. So you want to make sure you give yourself plenty of room around your subject, so as they change, you'll have the ability to line them up. So I want to document my son here as he wants desperately to be awake but keeps falling asleep. And I'm documenting him from above so I could use the kind of tile lines as a grid to line up the shots later. But I don't have a tripod set up above him, so I'm gonna, just by hand holding, I'm gonna angle it slightly differently. But I can use these lines to line up all the shots later. To practice this, we're gonna do some just really quick photos of each other making faces, and then kind of see how we can use Photoshop to line them up. And we can do this for anything. You can take the lenses and line them up. Play them sequentially. It's not so much so that we can have the animation, though the animation can show subtlety and change that sequential images sometimes have difficulty showing, like the lightning burst in this cloud, slowing down this moment photographically. Or the behavior of insects here, tending a larva, or breaking out of a cocoon here. Or even just the little changes in our expressions late at night over an instant. Or if you're really disciplined, taking an entire year and shooting it at the same time of day, so at midnight from this one place off the coast of Alaska, and seeing the changing colors and the changing placement of the sun on the midnights all through the different months for one full year in 2005. Or doing this in a fine art way and finding a lot of different models that all have the same eye color and lining up the eyes and then letting everything else be different, including the background. Now, this is basically a form of what all professional photographers do. This is for the Pink Floyd album cover for Wish You Were Here, a single they did. And it shows all of the photos before, as the person gets set on fire in this stunt suit, all the shots while they are on fire, shaking hands, and then I love this. They eventually feel like, okay, I'm getting hot, I gotta run away. Then the fire suppressant off in the corner. So we often take more shots than we need just to pull out the one shot we need. This project is you want a whole sequence of shots that shows your subject matter, which is the transformation from beginning, middle to end. Right? And you can decide what to do with it. You can add things, you can take things away, you can show the process of how something works, or the process of how something decomposes. But it shouldn't just be a movement test. It should really show change. So how do we start this process? Well, we're going to start it with sketching. And there's a lot of thought you want to put into it. So I'm going to call this my metamorphosis or transformation sketch. And you'll just do it in your sketchbooks. And really, this type of sketch is in film and in video called a storyboard. Because you're not trying to do a good drawing of your subject, you're trying to map out how your subject changes over time. And this is why I need you to sketch your idea, because it will kind of test the quality of your idea. I want you to think of it in terms of beginning, middle, and end. So just like any good story or any good joke has to have a setup, has to be established, your metamorphosis, your transformation needs to be established. So I guess I'll call this Carl, assignment 11, storyboard sketch. Let's try it again. All right, so first thing, I'm just going to draw my storyboard. And all of you can draw this without having any idea of what you're going to do. 3 squares on 3 squares. It's a nice, clean way to do it. Very important to acknowledge the square format that we're going to crop our shots down to. So it wouldn't make sense to shoot something like a surfboard or a Barbie doll or something really tall. We want it to look good within a square format. Okay. Now, this first row here, this is all the beginning. So in these first 3 frames, we are establishing what the subject is and what's going to change. So for me, I'm going to take an Easter egg, a beautiful blue Easter egg that my family dyed. And I like round things in square formats. So that's basically the composition. And the Easter egg is blue. I'm hoping that I can kind of shoot it so it looks like a planet, like a beautiful blue planet. And it has lots of little variations, like little white spots and things, as what happens when you dye eggs. And then what I want to do is slowly crack it for this demo. So in the first 3 frames, it's basically just going to establish that this is my subject matter. And then the action that is going to be depicted is the cracking. And it's going to crack more and more. Now the middle, beginning, middle, end, the middle is going to start breaking up the egg more and more to show that it's not stopping at just peeling the egg, it's actually going to start crushing the egg. And I want it to be recognizable as an egg that's getting cracked and peeled and eventually kind of broken apart. But it will also be kind of an environmentalist message, right? If it looks like the earth, it's showing the earth getting mined and stripped and destroyed. And then by the end, it's not going to resemble the egg so much anymore as a pile of stuff. Shell and yolk and white. And then maybe the stuff will start to get removed. And then the egg will be no more. So that's my idea. You want there, for whatever idea you're doing, you want it to look good within a square format, consistent in placement, in lighting, and in focus. And that's why a sketch really helps you kind of think this out. So how can you make it consistent in placement? Well, I'm going to use the same background for all of these. And I'm thinking I'll use like a black cloth or something dark, but maybe something like a pillow that will nestle the egg always in the